Today I'd like to speak with you how I onboard our new clients with the first 4 Vortex elements. And essentially these first 4 Vortex elements differentiate me from physiotherapy, Pilates studios, yoga centers, other body workers. They also give an intrinsic motivation to the client, and it's way easier to help regulate, share, teach, coach people who have got a really strong intrinsic motivation. People that stick around chiropractic care long term do have a high intrinsic motivation, but they also want autonomy. They also want their own responsibility in the healing process, and they also want agency. So agency is what can they do to complement the chiropractic adjustments. Whereas short-term clients, they'll be more into, I've got this symptom, I'll come into you, I'll pay you for that, you fix it. But long-term clients, on the other hand, they journey a lot more together with you. And although I use very similar tools for short-term and long-term clients, the way that I use them is extremely differentiated actually. So the first 4 Vortex elements are simply stand on both legs when you're standing, so not leaning onto one leg. The second one is when you're sitting, just sit and distribute the weight evenly through both sitting bones, which means don't sit all twisted up, crossed legs and texting people. The third one is keep your body hydrated. I make this very personal. It's non-generic. We all know that, we all should drink 8 glasses of water per day, but it's really generic. So I convert that into something a bit more personal. I put them on the scales and I weigh them, and I say for every 40 kilograms that you weigh, you need to have 1 liter of water. And the last one is just have an immediate short walk immediately following the adjustment. So we tell your body how it can be. The nervous system and the body really loves movement. So if you go and move your body for 10 minutes, your body will digest the adjustment a little bit easier than if you were to sit immediately after the adjustment. You've got this triangular bone at the base of your spine called your sacrum, and that just it doesn't allow movement when you're sitting on it. So you just really miss a part of the effectiveness of the adjustment. So get people doing those 4 things. We always leave our new clients with 2 things. One is the welcome booklet, and inside this welcome booklet, which is not just something to impart information about chiropractic, it's a really forward-facing thing for the client. But one page in particular that helps people latch onto these first 4 Vortex elements is our habit tracker. So people either cut this out and put it on their fridge, or they come back to this every day, let's say 9 p.m, same time every day. And that just gets them thinking about me in normal everyday situations. And it also, probably the biggest thing it does, it takes people from this apathetic baseline understanding of health, of pain and symptoms, and it just raises their awareness about their body. So what do I mean by everyday situations? So for example, when I ask people to stand on 2 legs, I might get comments like, I was standing in the supermarket the other day and all the people standing in front of me were just leaning onto 1 leg, so I really correct myself. And I always when they make a comment like this, I always ask them, look, does this make sense to you? Because people, they'll buy from you initially based on emotion, but they'll really justify coming to chiropractic long-term with logic. So these things need to make sense to people. And most people, independent of what symptom they come into you for, those first 4 elements really make sense to them as far as taking care of their spine goes. Now I want to differentiate to you how I use these Vortex elements for a short-term new person, so short that it can be a person that walks in off the street to inquire about chiropractic. And then part 2, I just want to slip into how I reframe that and use that for people that have been coming to me for longer than a year, for example, or at least longer than 30 adjustments. So we've got 2 examples just from my day in practice yesterday here in Singapore. I'm actually in our office now. So we had a guy just before the start of the shift. We always arrived 10-15 minutes early, and we had a guy just walk in and start inquiring about chiropractic care. And he was just leaning on 1 leg the whole time he was talking to me. And then he started saying how he's got this low back pain. And then I just make the observation. So in chiropractic care, you've got these 2 things, touch and tell. But we can take that 1 step further with observe and tell. The touch and tell is easy. You push on a pain point and the clients are quite surprised that you can actually feel that. It gives them some sort of trust and belief in you that you know what you're doing, because you really hit those points. They're easy for us to feel, but for the average client coming in off the street. It's quite a magical thing that you know how to feel that. But the observe and tell, this is where it can get really helpful with short-term, like a walk-in client or a brand new client. And I always like to relate it to the symptom that they're coming in with, because at the start of care, people are very apathetic towards me and towards chiropractic. They just want their symptom gone, which is fair enough, and we prematurely get into these phases of care and path to wellness, and we use these buzzwords which inherently shows our curse of knowledge, which is, oh, we're not into function, we're not into feeling, we're into function, Most people really don't know what you mean. So I like to get them to experience that. So of course I like that they understand that we're into function more than feeling, because feeling will inevitably follow their function. But I don't want them to understand it cognitively. It's not enough. They need to experience it in their body. So rather than me using those buzz phrases that we've got in chiropractic, I get them to really do function over feeling. So getting them to stand on two legs and feeling the difference between that and leaning on one leg, they really just notice that, and it does make sense to people. So this guy walked in, he said, look, I've got this low back pain, can chiropractic help? And then I just started observing and telling him, and I said, we've been talking now for a couple of minutes, and I noticed this whole time you're really leaning on one leg speaking to me, and you actually look quite comfortable. So when I see you standing like that, it's like two wrongs trying to make a right. Something's not right down here as far as balance goes. So your brain automatically then goes to lean on the one leg. So it's like robbing Peter to pay Paul, actually. So I just mentioned that to him, just observing you stand there so comfortably and so asymmetrically. I know there's something going on with your body. Then I just give him a tip. I just say, why don't you just try and distribute your weight on both legs today? If you complement that with coming in here with the chiropractic adjustments, that process will be a lot more accelerated, But that's a lifelong thing you really need to do to take care of your spine. And then we offered him an appointment. He didn't make an appointment initially, so we just gave him one of our newsletters, which we always give new clients to. They're really beautifully designed, but the one that we gave him was about back pain, and the body's framework really matters. Anyway, as the morning went on, we got this inevitable text message from the guy, and he's made an appointment for next week. So just observing and telling with someone who's slightly reserved with wanting to come in, but really just inquiry based, that's way more effective than telling the prices immediately and telling what the packages we have and all these sorts of things. That it's almost like seeking to understand the client's issue first and then having the courage to be understood. So I listened to his short history, and then I really told him, like, this is how you're using your body. It's not okay. But the second one was really interesting. This was a client that's been coming to me for about a year now. He's in day trading, and he really gets onto this idea of his body weight distribution. So when I do a new intake, I often put people on a bilateral scales, and I get them to really observe the difference between the weight going through the left and the right side of the body. This is a really nice objective metric because it makes sense to people that, oh, wow, I think I'm standing straight, but I'm actually not. Yeah, that makes sense that I might have low back pain or that I might have a headache or something like that. But anyway, this guy, he comes in yesterday, and I go through my subluxation examination. I'm like, wow, this is the best I've seen your body. He comes to me every 3 weeks now. And so the adjustment was a lot more refined. And he said to me, oh, I notice you're not making those big corrections through my pelvis anymore. I said to him, yeah, because we don't need to. Your body's essentially doing 24 hours a day what I was doing to it when you were coming to me twice a week. So your body's taken over that healing momentum. And then, of course, he says, oh, do you mind if I just pop on the scales? And it was exactly 46 and 46 kilos weight distribution. So then this is part 2 of the Vortex discussions for longer term clients. So rather than, because he hasn't had pain for ages. So like I just managed the walking client with, that's related to your pain, that's very much, giving them an idea of that chiropractic's potentially a solution for his problem. This guy coming in for a year, he's got different problems. He doesn't have pain anymore. So how do I use this? So I just ask him, well, does it make sense to you then that your brain and spinal cord, when they're sitting in a symmetrical musculoskeletal framework, that you can make clearer decisions at work? Can you imagine that instead of losing energy and your brain having to make all these compensations to keep you upright, can you imagine that you've preserved that energy now, and that energy can go into other things like better decision making? And he said, yeah, I get that. I get that if my brain and spinal cord sit in a balanced body, they work better. Yeah, of course, that's logical, that makes sense. Then he went on to talk about his sleep and how he's sleeping so much better than he has in the last 15 years. He's still got a lot of stress, but his body's got way more capacity now to handle that stress. So he's really rigid with his rules of standing on the two legs, but in fact, we've just, over the course of the year, we've really altered the reason why he comes in for chiropractic care. Very, very different than the guy that was presenting to me at the walk-in. He comes in because he's got a symptom and a pain. This guy initially presented to that. So I used that same pathway and tone of communication for a new client back then a year ago. But my tone and communication now is way more about performance. As we ascend with people's level of understanding of health and they get to like, chiropractic care can help my body emotionally, performance-wise, personal development-wise, the discussions are different, but the Vortex elements, the frameworks of the Vortex elements are really similar. It's just the tone and the refinement of the explanation it heads more into, it goes out of like pain, corrective care, maintenance care. It crosses a chasm then into emotional care, performance care, personal development. It's a big chasm. The top three are really a lot more challenging to create in a society. And that's simply because chiropractic, we've positioned ourselves extremely inaccurately in the marketplace. The average Joe Blogg's coming in with a headache prefers to have their neck cracked once and fixed forever, while we're standing here with this beautiful healing profession called chiropractic and wanting them to adopt our lifestyle for the entirety of their life. So there's a huge disparity from what people want and what the public are buying from us and what we as a profession actually stand for. A lot of it's often wrapped up in the curse of knowledge, but these first four Vortex elements, they just really make sense to most people. And I find it really important in the first 6 to 8 weeks of care. I want people leaving my office with this idea of like, okay, I'm coming to Vismai because I've got low back pain, for example. He's asking me to do these 4 things. I want them to think, that makes sense. I can see how that can help my low back. It gives me agency. No physiotherapy has ever asked me to do that. They've always asked me to do these exercises and stretch this and strengthen that and, you know, all these sorts of things, but they haven't fundamentally thought about spinal hygiene like chiropractic has. So they're the first 4 Vortex elements. You'll find it a lot easier if you do have a well-structured welcome booklet or at least some sort of habit tracker that you can give to people, because that creates engagement beyond the adjustment. It also creates agency in their responsibility, and it gives them autonomy because they want to have control. So why I don't speak about sleep, that's a question I often get asked, is I like to restrain that. The thing that I look for in the first few adjustments is some sort of engagement in these Vortex elements. And if somebody says, oh look, we've talked about standing, we've talked about sitting, but I was going to bed the other night, is there any tips on sleeping? As soon as I hear this, I know they're thinking, they're asking proactive questions to take control of their own health. So my whole behavior changes to them. Now, I guess another question that might get asked from you is like, how many people fill in a habit tracker? And I would say probably around 40% of people engage in that process properly, and the other 60% don't. But guess who are the people that are way easier to encourage to come into this beautiful lifestyle called chiropractic? It's those 40%. So I'm just really focusing on developing and ascending their levels of understanding of health and altering the reason why they come in for care. They're just infinitely easier for me to have a dialogue with because they're proactive people with their health. Okay, well, I hope that's helped you today, and I'll see you in the next film.